As part of our commitment to keeping you informed this election year, ABC Action News is offering candidates in the major races 5 minutes to talk about the issues. Here's Brendan McLaughlin again with tonight's Democracy 2010 profile.
I am here now with Jeff Atwater. He is the Republican nominee for the Chief Financial Officer position, a Florida cabinet position. Thank you for being on Democracy 2010.
Thanks, Brendan.
Mr.
Thank
Atwater.
you. Thank you.
The CFO's responsibility is to pay the state's bills, collect money on behalf of the state, and also keep track of the many agencies that are under the offices of the state. You come out of the legislature. You've been the Senate president over the last 2 years. What we've been hearing a lot of out of Tallahassee, out of the legislature, unfortunately, lately, is some less than responsible spending, some might say. Campaign credit cards being used inappropriately for personal expenses. The $48 million so-called Taj Mahal, the judicial building that is under construction right now, that was approved by the Senate and the House. How do you square that with voters who might be asking, you know, why you're qualified to be chief financial officer in light
of that? What they should know, the voters of Florida should know, is be sure the stories are clear. What's happening in Washington is very, very different than what's happening in Florida. Washington has a $14 trillion debt, probably another $1.4 trillion deficit this year. In the state of Florida, we have the highest bond rating in the country. We have a balanced budget. There's probably no state in the country that is as fine a shape as the state of Florida. And I think there's a good point. You would mention those stories that come up that a courthouse was built in Tallahassee. And the legislature approved, with no one's objection, a courthouse needed to be built. But when it was provided to the agency to manage the building of the courthouse, the bureaucratic process, somehow those individuals, after the legislature had said build a courthouse to state specs, went and added granite countertops, flat screen television sets, a dome on top that would make it look like an imperial palace. Those are the things that taxpayers can't understand. And the legislature should now go after the agency that built that building and say, what were you thinking? This is the people's money. You know, deploy it responsibly.
You have a background in banking, Mr. Atwater, along with Alex Sink, who's the current chief financial officer. How would you assess her job as CFO? How did she do it? And what would you do differently?
I think Alex brought a tremendous amount of business background to the job. But the job has constitutional powers, and it also has a bully pulpit, like most elected positions do. And I think it's time that the person who steps into that role said, look, we're going to drastically cut the spending of government so that more money can stay in the pockets of hardworking Floridians. We're going to bring competition back to Florida in the insurance market so that we can lower people's premiums. Tampa Bay is now the #1 auto fraud capital of the world. And we're tolerating your auto insurance and everyone else's auto insurance of us here in Tampa Bay of probably $300 to $500 more a year. Why don't we go after the thieves and the crooks and the cheats, let our insurance policies prices come down, bring in private market players, bring down the cost of property insurance?
Two quick questions to finish up here. You would, as CFO, if you were elected, you would sit on the State Board of Administration, which invests state money, including pension money. They've recently been criticized for investments of government money into mortgage-backed, risky sort of securities. There may be a lot of money lost as a result of that. Do you believe the CFO shares the blame in that? Who would you hold accountable for that?
There are 3 trustees that sit on the board of that plan. They're all accountable. These individuals are responsible for how the funds manage. That is retirement funds. Those are reserves. They should be thoughtful, prudent investing, and not on high flyers thinking you're going to outperform the market. So the trustees are accountable, and they should be held accountable for the decisions they made to have management buying in the products that we should not have ever invested in.
So you agree it was a mistake?
Yes.
Oil drilling became a big issue for you. Your colleagues, your Republican leadership in Tallahassee had a push for near-shore drilling off Florida, and you said no. You wanted more time to study it. Where do you stand now on that?
Same place. Florida has a brand name that a tremendous amount of our economic success and activity comes from along our beaches and along the entrepreneurs that serve along our beaches. You cannot mess with that brand. We have that responsibility for the ecosystem, as the environment, as well as economic success of Florida. And there's plenty in technology to be drilling and becoming energy independent. It doesn't need to be on our beaches. So we're still against that.
Very good. Jeff Atwater is our Republican nominee for Chief Financial Officer. Good talk. Thanks for being on Democracy 2010.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, back to you.
And tomorrow we'll talk with